Well, hello then. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Evening Standard columnist Ayesha Hazarika and the Sun's political editor Tom Newton-Dunn. Welcome to both of you.
Good evening.
So to the front pages then, let's take a look, shall we? In the Daily Telegraph, leading with claims that Labour officials told activist Bex Bailey not to report an alleged rape at a party event 6 years ago. The Times following suit with the alleged cover-up also on its front page, as does the Eye, with Tory MPs in the spotlight. The Guardian is reporting the women involved in the sexual assault allegations have condemned a broken system for reporting and investigating incidents. Meanwhile, the Financial Times says Britain would need 5,000 new customs officials to cope with a no deal on Brexit. According to figures in tomorrow's Daily Express, Britain has handed £13.9 billion to the European Union last year, £267 million a week. The Metro has more on the British Bake Off gaffe, Judge Prue Leith apologising for spoiling the final episode, which finally aired tonight. The Star also has that story. We need a warning here, don't we? Suggesting Prue Leith could be replaced by a past winner. A spoiler alert if people like me record these programmes and don't get to see it. Like the director in my ear, who's not happy to see the result. Anyway.
Bad luck.
Yes, bad luck indeed. So Ayesha Hazarika and Tom Newton-Dunn are here. Hope we didn't spoil anybody else's thunder there. So, to the Daily Telegraph then, Labour official told party activist not to report rape. This seems to have stepped up again, doesn't it, the Westminster allegations?
Well, look, this is an absolutely horrific story. I used to work in the Labour Party. I know Bex Bailey extremely well. She's been a very dedicated activist. She held a position on the National Executive Committee, so she's very, very well known. And the idea that she was raped at a Labour Party event, and the fact that she went to somebody and they basically told her, look, don't pursue it because it could put your career in jeopardy in the future, don't cause any trouble. That is absolutely abhorrent. That is one of the reasons why so many women all across Westminster don't come out and report sexual harassment or sexual misconduct because they are scared of being troublemakers. And here we have, it in black and white. So I am just aghast at this. I am horrified by this. I've been speaking to Labour women since the story broke, and people are just absolutely dismayed. I hope there's a full investigation as to why this happened. The Labour Party prides itself on being the party for women and equality, and this is absolutely disgusting.
What would have happened if it had, become to the attention of the leadership at the time, of whom you work closely with, of course?
Well, I think if I had heard about it, I think if my boss Harriet Harman had heard about it, I think if Ed Miliband had heard about it, we all would have said to Bex, we will give you whatever support you need to take this forward, and it's your choice if you want to report this, but we will absolutely support you. That's undoubtedly what would have happened. And I cannot think what has gone through the mind of this party official to say this could jeopardise your career or don't bring this up now. I'm absolutely disgusted.
Tom?
I rang Ayesha about 5 o'clock today to tell her this news about Bex Bailey after she went on the BBC to incredibly bravely talk about what had happened to her. And the context is Bex Bailey says she was raped in 2011, spent some time plucking up the courage to tell anybody about it because she felt so ashamed and embarrassed, finally then approached the senior Labour Party official for help, for guidance, and then was obviously told, go away, keep this to yourself because it's going to, quite frankly, do all our careers some damage. So I rang Ayesha being a friend and also someone I wanted to talk to about it for writing the story. And the shock in Ayesha's voice was extraordinary on the phone. I think that's the reaction across the board for, reasonable, normal-minded Labour people, of which, quite frankly, the party is still full of, that this should be happening on their watch. It really is horrific. But breaking this down, there are two stories here. There is the horrific act that was perpetrated upon Bex Bailey, and then there's the cover-up. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, in politics, it's not just the event itself that get people, it's the cover-up from Watergate and Nixon onwards. And what has happened in politics, and it's happened with the Tories and it's happened with Labour, is that events have been allowed to happen and then the authorities, whether they're the whips, whether they're the party, whoever, have brushed it under the carpet because it's simply too embarrassing at the time for the people in charge.
Or the
to deal
culture
with.
systemically allows this to happen, which is the bigger and broader question here, isn't it?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. I think there is a culture of victims not really being believed, and quite a lot of this behaviour just not being taken seriously. I think, you know, I've even had people today, before the Bex Bailey story broke, sort of saying, look, come on, unless it's sort of a criminal assault, unless it's rape, it's all just in the sphere of a bit of banter, harmless flirting, you know, we all do it. I'm sorry, that's not okay. You know, nobody expects to go to work, particularly in the House of Commons, where you're doing serious public, well, actually, you don't expect it anywhere, but particularly in the House of Commons, politicians make the law by which we all have to abide. They set the employment rights for how people have to behave at work. Young people shouldn't have to, well, anybody should not have to put up with this. It's not just young women, it's young men as well. And what people don't realise is sometimes you get very young people working in the House of Commons. They're often still at university, they're doing, as part of their politics degree, they come and spend a year in Westminster. They can be pretty vulnerable. And if there is a culture where people can't speak out and they're not believed, then that is appalling. And it's no good to say, oh, go to the chief whip. A lot of junior people wouldn't even know who the chief whip is, and it's quite a macho environment as well. The whole thing is absolutely rotten, and it's across every single party.
So that takes us to the Tory so-called sex dossier, published, we've seen in America, the full list with all the names, the redacted copy of which we seemed to have earlier. You wrote up the story about Sir Michael Fallon. Julia Hartley-Brewer herself has dismissed that incident. You know, was it overwritten by your paper, do you think? Was it an incident 15 years ago, which could seriously damage a long-serving senior politician? Was that justified? What is your view on that?
Even the very suggestion that it isn't justified to write up a story about a cabinet minister who was at the time a senior Tory. He'd been a minister, remember, in both Margaret Thatcher and John Major's governments before he was in opposition in 2002. The very suggestion that because he was somehow, you know, the seriousness of his crimes were nowhere near as serious as the sort of allegations about Labour having tonight, that somehow we shouldn't have reported it. I'm bewildered by it. The guy was groping a female journalist under the table
but some people
repeatedly.
Some people naturally touch other people while they're talking in an animated fashion. He wasn't doing that.
He was touching her under the table to the point, in her own words, she was going to punch him if he did it again. So, you know, of course it's not on the same level of severity as the rape allegations, but it is unacceptable, because if you don't call out these sorts of people, they go on to do it again. And maybe, you know, Julia Hartley-Brewer is a tough, hardened lobby journalist who prides herself on taking on all comers and punching all comers. You know, many women aren't necessarily like Julia Hartley-Brewer. There's another example, front page of the Telegraph today, Alison Pearson, the columnist, we just quickly go back to that. She's also doing a Julia Hartley-Brewer, saying, a minister lunged at me, but I'm not joining the witch hunt. You know, the idea that this is a witch hunt, you can separate, you know, it's okay for a bit of tumbling under the table, but it's not okay to do whatever else.
But some people can be misconstrued. The argument that Julia Hartley-Brewer and others have made is that most people meet their partners at work. If you can't approach somebody at work, some people do marry their bosses or vice versa.
Totally nonsensical argument to suggest that it's okay that you meet your partner by your partner groping you under the table repeatedly to the point
you don't know how relationships start. They have to start somehow, don't they?
If you had a relationship start by someone groping under the table, quite seriously, Anna, it's a mad argument, and you don't even believe that.
The whole thing about this, and this is a very dangerous conflation, and a lot of these particularly older, successful commentators and journalists, we had Anne Robinson yesterday saying, oh, all these women, they're all snowflakes, they need to get over the fragility of the workplace and stuff. I'll tell you what, the witch hunt is actually the women who are speaking out about it. It's fine for these older, confident women to say, oh, well, I would have just punched him in the face. If you're a junior researcher who's like 21 or 22, it happened to me in
You've made that point. The point is, should there be, you know, I don't know how we define it or how we work out what is, you know, stepping over the line or whatever, but somehow we need to try and work out what it is.
It's very easy, Anna. It's very easy to know when the line has crossed because you feel it yourself. This stuff is consensual. If you want to flirt with somebody, flirt your socks off, it's consensual. But you know, as a young woman or a young man, when somebody is perving over you, someone is making you feel uncomfortable, it's not
but you don't necessarily like everybody who approaches you, do you?
No, but
it's not going to be instantly consensual.
If you're in a workplace, it's not a pick-up joint. You know, the idea that you're at a workplace and getting kind of groped and fondled and this, that, the next thing, that's just not... We're in the 21st century. It's like, it's not a Benny Hill sketch. You know, it's not...
I've managed to get married without groping any women under the table during dinner ever, and I know a whole load of people who've also managed to do that. You know, why somehow this is some sort of normal, you know, course of...
And the other thing is, it's a sliding scale. If you are saying it's all right, it's just going to turn a blind eye to people sort of groping people, that is just a sliding scale where it is only going to escalate.
We're in violent agreement.
Sorry, I know.
Back to the Tory dossier.
Yes.
We should.
Okay.
That all said, and by God, it feels good to have got that off our chests, I'm sure. This here Tory dossier, I don't think, quite frankly, is what we thought it was 2 or 3 days ago. It was started with 38 names, there are now 44 names on it because these Tory researchers are adding to this list nightly. I've seen both lists now, and you know, we spent the last 2 or 3 days pouring through them. At least 2/3 of the stories on the list that they purport to have happened, quite frankly, don't add up. However, and this is the problem, our job at the moment, quite frankly, lobby journalists, is separating the wheat from the chaff. There's a whole load of chaff, but there is still within that list, I know for a fact, some serious allegations of wrongdoing, and I don't think this is going to end until those allegations are fully aired and the culprits punished.
So hence, I've gone to the Guardian. Westminster shaken by 2 new claims of sexual assault. Hence, to go back to the ministers panic as Tory sex dossier is published. Do you get a sense of panic?
Totally.
Yeah.
Nobody in Westminster, where I was all day, as I am every day, was talking about anything else apart from this. And one Tory MP I know particularly well, I bumped into this morning, said he walked into the tea room in the Commons the night before, made a few jokes about, oh dear, isn't this thing a bit funny? I wonder who's going to get the chop next, sort of thing. And he was met with stony silence by every single Tory MP in the room, which suggests there's more than one guilty conscience out there.
And no suggestion this is a witch hunt, that every minor allegation will be, you know, blown up into something to equal harassment, abuse, assault, whatever.
I think the way with respect, I think the way you phrased that is unfair. People are not blowing things up. People are just coming out and talking about it. There have been decades and decades of this type of behaviour, and people are only really talking about it for the first time now. And what you need to have is a proper independent complaint system that people can go to and they can talk anonymously to. Because the other thing is, as soon as you put your head above the parapet, you have everybody kind of tearing you down, calling you an attention seeker or a snowflake, or somehow you've brought it on yourself. This is why women and young men don't report this stuff. It needs to be taken seriously. Political parties need to take it seriously, and the political leadership need to show that they're going to have a zero tolerance policy on it.
OK, still to come, we'll take a look at the terror attack New York City tonight. Back with that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me this evening, Ayesha, Hazarika and Tom Newton-Dunn. Let's reflect on the breaking news this evening, shall we? The terror attack in New York City, confirmed by the mayor, the governor, the chief of police as well. The driver of the truck has been named in the last half hour as Seyfulo Saipov, who careered, as the Times tells us, along a cycle path, striking riders and pedestrians before hitting a school bus, and children and adults in that also injured. Yet again, not far from the World Trade Center memorial site, and horror for New York City.
Absolutely, and a type of horror which we've seen before on the streets of London, the London Bridge attacks, and the Westminster attack as well, the knife man who ran into the House of Commons New Palace Yard. This is the sort of DIY attack where you need almost nothing to carry it out apart from a vehicle and, you know, a knife, and that's it really. Anyone can launch it, and as the Director General of MI5 was saying the other day, Andrew Parker, it's incredibly hard to stop. Someone can get radicalised and plan this attack within a matter of 2 or 3 days. That's all you need. And unless you're living inside people's heads, it's almost impossible to prevent. Hence why, you know, huge armed presence on Britain streets, London streets and New York streets. And you really do feel for the security services when something like this happens, because as I say, unless you can mind control everybody, the only way to stop this is to stop people getting radicalised in the first place, which is, you know, obviously one enormous, great big fight. And
Donald Trump, another tweet from him, in fact, saying we must not allow ISIS to return or enter our country after defeating them in the Middle East and elsewhere. Enough, he says. And this, of course, plays into his efforts to prevent migration from several mainly Muslim countries coming into the United States.
I mean, of course, that is the problem, or the downside of defeating ISIS in Syria, is that, you know, it's whack-a-mole. You know, they're all in one place. You're fighting them, you know where to bomb them, quite frankly. Once they move, then they spread out, they go back to New York, they go back to London, they go everywhere.
Well, we don't know where he's been, and he may well be a kind of a homegrown person. But the problem with Donald Trump...
He's supposedly from Florida at the moment, but certainly will investigate where his heritage might be from.
Be a US citizen. The problem with Donald Trump declaring that, you know, he's defeated ISIS with the fall of Raqqa is he's got to be very careful about this, because you might have won, you know, that particular battle with the fall of Raqqa, but the ideology has not gone away at all. And it's very much a Pyrrhic victory. And I think, you know, there'll be more and more of these types of attacks. And in a way, for Donald Trump, you know, it will help him with his idea that, you know, he's got this, his sort of war on terror. But the only thing that's interesting about this guy as well was, thank goodness he didn't have actual firearms, because he had a sort of makeshift paintball
and a pellet gun.
Yeah, but thank goodness he didn't actually have, you know, automatic weapons.
There's the front page of the Daily Mirror just in. Carnage on the streets, 8 dead, 12 more injured as gunman drives pickup truck down a cycle lane. I think the figures are slightly changing, 11 seriously injured, but we'll wait and we'll get updates obviously throughout the evening on that story. We have overrun on absolutely everything. What story would you like to do next?
Can we talk about Bake Off?
You can do Bake Off very briefly if you don't.
So Pruley, we can talk about this now because we've had the show. You know,
had the show. Turn off quick if you've not seen it.
Sky Plus it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too late. So Sophie Faldo won.
Gosh, was that a shock?
No.
I don't know, I don't watch it. Anyway, so Pruley tweeted about this some 12 hours before the show was broadcast, ruining it for absolutely everyone, including the chap who sits next to me at work in the Sun's office in Westminster, who was planning, he's a very sweet guy, was planning his own bake-off party tonight. All his mates get round and watch Bake Off. Millennials, they do strange things.
Well, the Sun offices have changed.
Well, it's 2017, we discussed that. Hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people's entire TV viewing was ruined today. But the best thing is that Pruley has now explained how she managed to make this appalling screw-up by saying, and here's the beautiful thing about it, is I'm in Bhutan, she says.
No, she's a woman off my own
The time difference
I get confused by time zones.
The time difference is massive. I thought they'd announced it 6 hours ago. Who hasn't made that mistake somehow?
I bet you Mary Berry is sitting somewhere going, ha, 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 ha.
Exactly.
I would never have done that. Would not have happened under my watch.
We will see you for more at 11:30. Thank you very much indeed. Ayesha Hazarika, Tom Dunn, thank you. Coming up next, of course, the very latest from New York City, the latest on that terror attack, which has left at least 8 people dead. Hello there, you're watching Sky News and the press preview. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Evening Standard columnist, Ayesha Hazarika, and the Sun's political editor, Tom Dunn. Welcome to both of you. So, lots to talk about in the front pages. The Daily Telegraph leading with claims that Labour officials told activist Bex Bailey not to report an alleged rape at a party event 6 years ago. The Daily Mail, Ms Bailey says she wasn't even offered a cup of tea after discussing the ordeal. The Times also reports on the alleged cover-up. Labour tried to cover up rape, their headline, as does the Eye, which puts Tory MPs in the spotlight, saying ministers panic as Tory sex dossier is published. There's The Guardian. Women involved in the allegations have condemned a broken system for reporting incidents. Meanwhile, Brexit is on the front page of the Financial Times, with reports that Britain will need 5,000 new customs officials to cope with a no-deal situation. According to figures in tomorrow's Daily Express, Britain handed £13.9 billion to the European Union last year. The Daily Mirror is leading with the New York terror attack, with at least 8 people killed. The Metro has more on the British Bake Off gaffe. Judge Pruley apologising for spoiling the final episode, which finally aired tonight. And the Daily Star also going with that story. So Ayesha and Tom are here. To the Daily Mail we go first. Labour tried to cover up my rape. The words of Bex Bailey, who I know, Ayesha, is well known to you.
Yes, I know Bex very well. She's a good friend of mine, and she's been a very active participant in the Labour Party. She was part of the National Executive Committee. Very dedicated, bright, lovely young woman. It is heartbreaking to hear the story that she was raped, attacked and raped at a Labour Party event. But then a Labour Party official discouraged her from reporting it because they inferred that it would be damaging to her career and it was a very inconvenient thing to be happening in the party. And that is absolutely disgusting. I am so horrified to learn about this, and I feel like the whole party has let this poor woman down. The Labour Party used to pride itself on being the party of women and equality, fighting on issues, you know, trying to help women have the confidence to report rape, all that kind of thing. So it is unbelievable that a party official would try and sort of, you know, manipulate her not to take this claim forward. And I'd like to find out who that party official was, because they should not be part of the Labour Party, quite frankly.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Obviously, there is an investigation. Jeremy Corbyn says it will be published. Should names be out there in the public, do you think, after an incident of this magnitude?
Yes, I think the names should be out. You know, I think it is completely unacceptable. You know, the Labour Party prides itself on its values, and, you know, we are a party which is aspiring to get into government to set the laws of the land. The idea that somebody would have said to a distressed young woman, oh, don't do this, it's all a bit difficult, it won't be good for your career, that is absolutely unacceptable. That is disgusting.
I think it's, you know, more serious than that still. Two people could potentially go to prison for this if Bex Bailey's allegations are able to be proved in court, and there's no suggestion why they shouldn't be. One is the potential rapist who committed this obscene act upon her, but the other is the party official, and it's hard not to see how prosecutors, police could now construct a case where they are at the very least obstructing justice by telling her to go away and forget all about it, and at the potential worst, you know, acting in conspiracy for this rapist to get away with it. It really is that ugly, and if this, what Bex Bailey is saying, is all true, and we have no reason to disbelieve it, then these people should be going to prison for it. And I think what this now speaks to, which is the wider truth to a lot of the stories we've been seeing over this last 2-3 days, the feeding frenzy, the witch hunt, the very, very legitimate pursuit of bad allegations, in my view, which is what's going on here, is not just the incidents itself, the bad behaviour, the unacceptable behaviour, whether it's groping women under the table, which you can't do, or raping people, which you obviously can't do. It's the cover-up. And it's the reason why parties covered this up, which really needs to be dug out, and I think will actually be fully exposed. And whether it's the operation of whips, party whips, you know, doing the government's business, but also trying to save the government's blushes and save MPs' blushes for their indiscretions, sexual, drunken, gambling, whatever, or it's party reputations, you know, the political expediency not to have scandals out there, which is, you know, brushing it all under the carpet, not cause trouble, has led to some quite heinous things, of which this is, you know, probably the worst example yet.
Your paper yesterday led the way on this, I suppose, with you and The Sun writing up the Sir Michael Fallon, Julia Hartley-Brewer incident of 15 years ago, of which he's apologised, and she has come out today and said effectively that what we're seeing now is a witch hunt. You firmly believe that you were right to write that up. Yeah,
I mean, Julia Hartley-Brewer is in a funny position here, because she, of course, spent the entirety of Tuesday broadcasting on her radio station about how some cabinet minister groped her under the table, and, you know, she's the one that put the allegation out there. Now, Julia Hartley-Brewer, as indeed Alison Pearson on the front page of the Daily Telegraph tomorrow is saying, a cabinet minister did this to me too, and there she is there on the corner. A minister lunged at me, but I'm not joining the witch hunt. It's all well and good for Julia Hartley-Brewer and Alison Pearson, who are strong women, ballsy, tough women, pride themselves on being able to punch men in the face, as Julia Hartley-Brewer might say. And therefore, when men do grope them under the table, because that is what Michael Fallon did, it is somehow acceptable. It isn't acceptable, because there are other women out there who don't know how to punch men in the face and are very susceptible and very upset with this sort of behaviour. So absolutely, we're justified in reporting on Michael Fallon. There's another story on the front page of the Times we can go on to.
I just want to pick up on that thing. There's a really interesting generational divide, I think, particularly with women. A lot of young women who are researchers, journalists who are working around Parliament, are absolutely sick of this type of culture. They're sick of the, OK, it's not criminal assault, but there is just low-level, constant sexual harassment that goes on, and they've had enough of it. The women of a slightly older generation, some of these very successful commentators and journalists, we had Anne Robinson yesterday saying all these women are fragile, you know, they're the weakest link, if you like. It's so lacking in empathy to understand what it's like to be a young woman. You don't have any power. Your career could be made or broken by your boss who is harassing you or bullying you. And, you know, we are in 2017. The idea that we should all just man up and get on with it is just absolutely ridiculous. And also it goes to victim blaming. You know, some of the women who have come out, they have had a slew of, you know, horrible attacks on them. You're attention seeking, you're a snowflake, you know, man up. This is what the rough and tumble of Parliament is like. And actually, people shouldn't have to come to work and feel like they're being harassed all the time and feel that they've got no course of redress.
So I went on to the eye while you were talking. Ministers panic as Tory sex dossier is published. You mentioned the Times is starting to also name names. The publication of this, I think, first of all abroad, but it's been published online now. First of all, were redacted. You know,
yes.
It's got various names, hasn't it?
Yeah,
this
and quite
list.
frankly, you know, we should be honest about this as well. This here dossier, quite frankly, isn't the incredibly damning indictment on 38, 44 Tory MPs that alleged at first to be. You know, my office and a whole lot of other journalists, all of us, quite frankly, reporting on politics down in Westminster, have done little else, sadly, apart from plough through this stuff. And most of those allegations on that list just either don't stack up or they are instances of perfectly consensual relationships. A cabinet minister and a Tory MP, both unmarried, both single, you know, had a relationship. That is not a matter for any of us. But
dodgy.
there are indeed, and I think it's still a minority of stuff that on the list that are quite serious allegations that need to be got to the bottom
So it's this boxed story that you're...
So here's the story about Damien Greene. Now, again, we published this Michael Fallon story of you know, touching Julia Hartley-Brewer under the table at dinner yesterday, and we were accused somehow of belittling the greater crimes here, which is serious sexual harassment and assault. Now, you can do both at the same time. You can talk about gropey, inappropriate behaviour by cabinet ministers and very serious sexual harassment. Both, quite frankly, need to be aired. The Times have a news story tomorrow, which is now being formally investigated by the Cabinet Secretary. The Prime Minister has referred this to the Cabinet Secretary tonight to get to the bottom of. And that's the allegation that Damien Greene, who's the first Secretary of State, Theresa May's de facto deputy, brushed his knee against a journalist called Kate Maltby, who sits in this chair every now and then reviewing the papers.
As does Julia Hartley-Brewer, yes.
As does Julia Hartley-Brewer. And Damien Greene sent her flirty texts and behaved inappropriately towards her. He thoroughly denies this, must be said. But again, it's on the scale. You know, brushing your hand past someone's knee, flirtatious comments on text message. Is that acceptable? Where does the balance of proof lie?
And also, there's a power imbalance as well. You know, this is a very senior politician. This is a young journalist. I mean, we'll have to wait to see what the investigation says. But, you know, I know Kate, and I don't think Kate would have made this allegation if she did not feel that it was serious and it caused her...
If it had just been the knee, would she have let it go?
I don't know. I don't know how she feels about it. I don't know all the details.
We've had the case in Dubai of the man who accidentally touched a man's hip and ended up in jail for 3 months.
But we don't have
and everyone rounded on that as being bizarre. Do you see what I mean?
Look, there is no, and this is half the problem, I suppose, you know, there is nowhere is it ever written down what you can and can't do with when men and women interact. Quite frankly, Michael Fallon did a whole load more than Damien Greene. Put his hand repeatedly on Julia Hartley-Brewer's knee. That is not being investigated because the Prime Minister was, or the number 10 today was saying there was no complainant, there is no victim, Julia Hartley-Brewer is not bothered. Kate Maltby is bothered by having a hand brushed past her knee, therefore there is an investigation. So there is a swirl of confusing, not just allegations, but the way the government is having to handle it all.
But one of the important things as well, I feel that quite a lot of the men are getting off the hook right now because the discussion is, well, are these, you know, there's a lot of victim blaming. I feel there's a lot of, well, you know, is she just overreacting and this, that, the next thing. If you look at the list and if you look at the type of people that are doing it, they are the same type of people. They tend to be...
But you're generalising now.
Well, they're men. There's not any women on that list. It's not women that are going around perving over...
There are women on that list.
There are women
No, but they're not. It's not the same kind of...
Two women on the list. One is a ridiculous
and it's a consensual...
one. Both are consensual ones.
Exactly, exactly. I just think a strong message has got to get... And I think, again, it's quite a generational thing. Parliament is where they sit in judgment of the rest of us. They make the laws about how we have to live our lives. They have to hold themselves and conduct themselves to a higher standard. Parliament shouldn't be something out of a 1970s Benny Hill sketch.
In response to the allegations against Damien Greene, detailed there in the Times, this statement from Downing Street saying an allegation has been made in relation to the First Secretary of State, which he strongly denies. The Prime Minister has referred the matter to the Cabinet Secretary to establish the facts and report back as soon as possible. Might the Cabinet Secretary be quite busy, and might this lead to a reshuffle at some point, do you think, if these allegations are deemed serious enough?
No, I think it's too premature to say that now. Certainly about Damien Greene and Michael. I don't see Michael Vann losing his job with that. He clearly has apologised. You know, they've all moved on. Damien Greene, I also don't see losing his job over this. Even if all this was stacked up and proved by the Cabinet Secretary, etc., this wasn't actually committed while he was in office. It's quite clear in the Times reporting this. He's therefore not subject to the ministerial code. This will go down as an embarrassment. And actually, there's a greater political expediency, which is Theresa May is incredibly weak at the moment, perhaps a little bit less weak than she was at party conference, which was an all-time low, but she's simply not able to sack anyone, let alone Damien Greene, who's her closest and oldest friend in politics. So for simple reasons of survival, most of them will stay. I think some ministers will go. Some ministers on the list we just talked about.
But not related to...
Not the ones we talked about tonight, but they are wrong-uns, and we will find evidence eventually to get them out of office, but none we've mentioned so far.
The thing that I think we've got to avoid is just, we can all do this retrospectively, it's what happens going forward. Theresa May needs to show leadership by setting up a proper independent complaint system and making sure that her own political party, in the same way that Jeremy Corbyn has to do, and Vince Cable and everyone else who leads up a political party, get some proper HR in place. There is no human resources in Parliament. OK,
lots more still to come, including we will be reflecting on the 8 killed in that terror attack in New York. Back in just a moment. Well, welcome back to the press preview. We are taking a look through the newspapers. I'm joined this evening by Tom Newton-Dunn and Ayesha Hazarika. Welcome to both of you. Daily Mirror, let's take a look at that, shall we? Reflecting on the terror attack confirmed in New York this evening. 8 dead, several more injured. Once again, a vehicle used to perpetrate terror, it seems.
The sort of attack that is known as a DIY attack now, we've seen them here, both in London Bridge and also the attack on Parliament. People who need very little indeed to cause terror and, mass panic. A vehicle and a knife or a cap gun, some sort of imitation firearm happened here. But it's enough to kill people, and it's enough to cause terror across an entire city and, get your twisted calls on the front page of newspapers. And, this is the new shape of terror. It's exactly what the Director General of MI5, Andrew Parker, was warning about the other day. This sort of very unsophisticated, primitive type of attack is almost impossible to stop unless you can literally live inside someone's brain. They become radicalised very quickly, of course of a couple of days. They can plan this over the course of a couple of hours, and the only way to stop it, quite frankly, is tackling the ideology and stopping the entire brainwashing, the entire path of persuasion which the likes of ISIS use, and that's an enormous job and will take many years.
But it's a very difficult thing to do, and Trump has been tweeting quite kind of jubilantly that he has single-handedly defeated ISIS because Raqqa has fallen. And I think that's very misjudged. That's a kind of a Pyrrhic victory, because this ideology has not gone away at all. And if anything, people who have this ideology will still want to do attacks. They'll do these lone wolf attacks. And also, he shouldn't think that this gives, grist to the mill for his Muslim ban, because it looks like this guy may well have been a homegrown terrorist as well.
Trump saying we've got to stop ISIS from infiltrating.
The first image of him. Sorry, Tom, do continue, yeah.
Trump complaining on Twitter tonight, we've got to stop ISIS from coming back into our country, when this guy was from Florida.
He's from Tampa, yeah.
Is unfortunate, to say the least. The ideology you've got to fight, not the geography.
Beginning to hear more about the victims as well. The Belgian Foreign Ministry confirming that one of their citizens was a victim, and Argentina's Foreign Ministry saying that Argentine citizens died in the attack, but did not say how many. So we still await more details on that. But
and I think the only thing is, thank goodness he didn't actually have a gun, he sort of had a paintball sort of thing. But I think the death toll could have been much, much higher.
We only have 30 seconds left. Daily Star and the Metro, the inside pages as well, yes, there we are. There's the sun at its best.
That's such a good headline.
Leaky bun time. So Poor old Proof Leaf. She went and blew it, revealed the name of the winner of Bake Off hours before everyone was desperately looking forward to seeing it. But you feel her pain. She did this because she says she was in Bhutan, and we'll leave you with her final quote. She said, she tells us, the time difference is massive. I thought they got it 6 hours ago. I'm in too much of a state to talk about it. I effed up.
What was so...
Boy, you did, Prue.
What was so funny is suddenly people started noticing that Prue was trending on Twitter, and it was like, oh my goodness, like what's happened? All I can say is this would never have happened with Mary Berry. Mary Berry is a wise woman, and she is not on Twitter.
I don't know, honestly. The clock change did for me. I couldn't possibly do the Bhutan time difference.
Were you tweeting when the clocks went?
No.
I was tweeting
which way round it went.
And I was tweeting, what time is it? I do the same thing. I have like 2 hours. I'm like, what time is it? Am I a Time Lord? Is it 1 hour forward? Is it 1 hour back? Who knows?
I still know fall back, spring forward, all that nonsense. Anyway, it doesn't help me at all. Lovely to have you on. Thank you both very much indeed. Ayesha, Hazarika, Tom Newton-Dunn, thank you. So coming up in the next hour on Sky News at midnight, we'll have much more on the New York terror attack, which has left at least 8 people dead. More details now emerging about the alleged suspect.